After 40 years, two of the most iconic vintage low-top athletic sneakers are still wildly popular today in 2025. But we've seen a lot of these brands that take these time-honored styles and over time completely gut them of any and all quality and just ride off the popularity of the silhouette so that you think that you're getting the qualities that built the shoe's popularity when in all reality it's just a facade of their former selves. So we're going to cut both these shoes in half and run through our test to really figure out, are these shoes still built to the quality that built the name? These two shoes, they look very similar all the way down to the little midsole cutout that we'll talk about, but there's one giant difference between these two that I don't think anyone really knows, but it makes it a big impact on how they wear and how they feel underfoot that you really only see when you get them cut in half. And I honestly had no idea before I started prepping for this video. Reebok can trace its roots all the way back to the 1800s, all the way back to 1895. But the Reebok that most people know started in 1958 with the adoption of the name Reebok, named after the Afrikaans word for antelope or the type of antelope, Reebok. And Reebok flew mostly under the radar leading up into the 80s when the grandsons of the original founder, Joe and Jeff Foster, saw a huge upswing in this new casual exercise trend with aerobics, training classes, running, jogging, weightlifting. And their family had had a long history and tradition of making athletic footwear, so they wanted to make a shoe that would actually capitalize on these new trends. So in 1982, they released the Freestyle, which is not the shoe, a shoe that was made to fully capture the attention of the ladies in the new workout world. And this shoe basically blew up overnight. It became one of the hottest shoes of the year, and a lot of people speculate it's because it was very performance-based, but at the same time there was a heavy emphasis on the aesthetic, particularly the 80s leggings and over-the-top, obvious athletic, almost like athleisure of this era's style. Reebok wanted to make a high-performance tennis sneaker that would still perform just as well off the court, and most importantly, look good on and off the court. And in 1985, Reebok releases this shoe, the Reebok Club C, and people immediately loved these shoes because it was that perfect blend of performance and more casual aesthetic, everyday wearability while still having performance attributes to it. And for the last 40 years, this shoe has been in and out of popularity, but it's basically been a staple for Reebok ever since. Compare that to the New Balances, and this basically is a similar concept where New Balance has seen a lot of success over that decade in the 80s with basketball, with running especially, and they had a 650 shoe that was a high top performance basketball sneaker, and this 550 was essentially the same concept they did with the Club C. They wanted a more casual, less performance, a more everyday wearable sneaker that still had the performance of their 650. But unlike the Club C, the 550 basically died off and drifted off into obscurity for a few decades until more recently when it was revived, and now it's one of the most loved sneakers that New Balance has. So what are the contenders here? Well, first we got the New Balance. The style is the 550. They weigh 1 pound, 1 ounce. They retail for $110. They're made in China. And the way they position this product is the original 550 debuted in 1989 and made its mark on basketball courts from coast to coast. After its initial run, the 550 was filed away in the archives before being reintroduced in a limited edition release in late 2020 and returned to its full-time lineup in 2021. Versus, the brand is Reebok. The style is the Club C 85 vintage shoe. They weigh 12 ounces. They retail for $90. They're made in Vietnam, and the way they position this product is classic court-inspired style with a clean look. Taking their cues from the 80s court classic, these shoes are all about simplicity. They have a leather upper and timeless, easy to wear style. The EVA midsole gives you lightweight cushioning, and if you want either pair of these shoes, check them out via links in my description. These are all of our handmade wallets that we sew right here in the shop, cut out right here in the shop, and we don't use sewing machines. We do it the old school way with the saddle sewing technique that they use to make saddles instead of the sewing machine. It's one piece of thread, 2 needles, and weaving in and out of the thread all the various colors from tan, light brown, medium brown, dark brown, and black, but more importantly, the various wallets. So starting with the smallest and the first, the one that really launched the brand on Kickstarter, the Claude wallet, 2 pockets, 1 shorter pocket and a bigger pocket behind with the rolled edge so you can hold more cards. Same thing with the slim wallet, it's just a redesign of this. Same concept, 2 pockets, rolled edge for the bigger pocket. Then the Big Daddy version of the Slim, the SBB, that we actually made this pattern for the shattered backboard cut in half way early in the YouTube days. But it has 2 card pockets in the front and that bigger cash pocket with the rolled edge. Then to the Swayze, the one I use probably most every single day. So it's got 4 card pockets so you can really partition off and separate your cards. And if that's not enough card room and you want a little cash room, you can go to the Togo. 2 big pockets where you can store cash folded once and 4 card pockets. If you're old school, you want the traditional bifold. Same concept here, but you've got 6 cash pockets with these little hidden pockets back here and that cash slot there, traditional bifold. And the biggest daddy of them all, the travel wallet. little spot for your boarding pass and your passport, your ID, all your credit cards, all the junk that you're gonna accumulate on the trip, even this little hidden pocket right there. So check these all out below. So now let's start comparing these two, starting with the leather upper, because the 550, at least this version of it, was one of the worst leathers that we've seen. Some of the other pairs, like the ALD pairs, had better leather, but this is pretty bad leather from New Balance, because New Balance is known for making really good leather. They have like a pig suede in their higher end stuff, their running sneakers, but this stuff, not so great. It's only 1 millimeter thick, but the main problem is it's basically just a suede leather. They put a really heavy plastic coat on top to make it look like it's a higher quality grain leather, so that once we started burning it and scratching it off, there was no smooth grain, it's just a rough suede. For a cheap sneaker, it's not the biggest deal, but you compare it to the Club C's that are actually cheaper. The Club C's is a real grain leather. You can see that little grain in the cross section. It's a lot more light and tumbled. You know, it's gonna be a lot more wrinkly because it is tumbled and it's got that more broken in feel compared to the more stiff and hard leather on the 550s. The Club C is also a little bit thicker at 1.5 millimeters thick. The coating on top, rather than this heavy plastic, it's more of a pigment on top. We ran the puncture test on both, and the New Balance took 33 pounds, where the Reeboks took 51 pounds. So which leather is better? I think overall the Reebok is a better leather. It's softer, it's gonna be easier to break in, it's a little bit thicker, it has the grain in it, and I think it's gonna age a lot better over the long term compared to this really heavily coated New Balance leather. But what about the insides of these two sneakers? Well, the New Balance 550 has your just classic lining. You know, there's nothing spectacular about it. And it's only a quarter lining, it only goes through the heel. Compare that to the Reeboks, and this is something I really like about the Reeboks, because this lining is terry cloth, and this to me is like a fun artifact from the early 80s and the technology they had at the time, because nowadays we would say like, okay, we want a shoe that's gonna wick the moisture away so it's more athletic and so you don't get sweaty and then bogged down. We would, you know, nowadays you'd be like, okay, we're gonna add these vents, we're gonna add this material that lets air in and out really easily, but still lets moisture do this or this. We'd use all this man-made tech, versus in 1980, they're like, oh, we need to reduce some moisture on the inside of the shoe. What if we just put a towel on the inside? And that's basically what terry cloth is. It's just towel material, but used as a lining. And just like the 550s, it's just in the heel. But I just love how simple the technology was back then. So which one's better? Personally, I like the terry cloth. I think it has that really cool vintage look to it. It does absorb your sweat. You know, maybe it's not quite as abrasion resistant as this more modern material in New Balance, but I'm still gonna give the edge to Reebok, because I just think it's better and I like it, and it fits the theme better. One of my favorite parts of these shoes, and one thing that makes them very similar, is this midsole that is a little cutout through the medial side. So on the inside of your foot, instead of this cupsole being wrapped all the way around, it has this giant window that you can actually see the midsole. And when I did this video, I wasn't really sure what it was for, and then after reading through the comments and doing a little bit more research, a lot of people seem to think that it's to add some flexibility to the shoe. So instead of trying to bend this cupsole and having it crumple and potentially split, having that cutout allows the shoe to flex a lot more. The other reason they allegedly do this is just to give the foam some area to squish, so that when you land on this, instead of it all being encapsulated with the cupsole, it'll squish out a little bit, especially in that arch area. Who knows if either of those are true? I think for sure the flexibility is a thing, so I can feel the difference. But I don't even know, maybe this isn't even the midsole. I could easily see this just being a fake like layer of foam, because we've seen like Birkenstock do fake cork on the outside. So we don't even know if it's real. But from the outside, it seems like the foam is about the same. They're around a 35 to 40 Shore A. And so for the midsole, which one's better? I would say it's a tie. And even though these outsoles look nearly identical, at least in application, they perform very differently. The Reebok is a lot more flexible. It's a lot softer of a rubber. The Reebok is 65 Shore A versus the New Balance is 75 Shore A. So this is more like your work boot, really heavy duty. It can be more durable. It's maybe a little bit less grippy because it's harder. But this outsole, if you remember for the cut in half, is super thick. It's like 6 millimeters thick, which is 2 to 3 millimeters thicker than most sneakers. And just looking at the side profile of this looks a lot thinner. It looks more like a 4 millimeter outsole. And so comparing the two, with the Reeboks, you got a lot more flexibility. It's gonna have more grip, but it's not gonna last nearly as long, versus the New Balance. They're gonna be a lot harder. You're not gonna get as much impact resistance, you're not gonna get as much grip, but they're a lot thicker and they're gonna be a lot more durable because of how hard that rubber is. But both of them still have that sidewall stitch that wraps all the way around. You can see the sidewall stitch from the inside. So which outsole is better? Right now, I'd say the New Balance, because I don't know how thick this is, if this foam is even real or not. So we'll give it final judgment when we get it cut in half. But the one thing that makes these two shoes so different, and why this one you can flex like this, and the New Balance, you can barely flex it, is all on how it's constructed. And you would never know that there's a difference in how these are constructed unless you literally cut it apart or tore the insoles out to see what's underneath and had enough understanding to know what you were looking at. because if you remember the New Balance, these are almost built like boots because this is a board lasted sneaker. So what that means, they take this hard pink fiber board and they take the upper and they wrap it underneath, and that's what seals those two layers together. Then the midsole and outsole is attached to that. So all that material that's wrapped under and that pink fiber board adds a lot of rigidity and a lot of stiffness to the shoe. But at the same time, it really structures the foam. It prevents you from rolling one way or the other. It compresses the foam a lot more equally. And because New Balance always has some sort of heel cup, these shoes feel very stable underfoot. But you lose some of that squish of the softer midsole and you lose some squish overall. And so they're not the most comfortable and squishy shoes underfoot. Compare that to the Reeboks, these are completely different. So this is just like your classic sneaker construction where it's a Strobel stitch, where instead of that upper being tucked under a thicker board, it's just stitched at almost a 90-degree angle to a lot lighter and a lot more flexible Strobel board. And this Strobel board is basically just a piece of fabric. It has a little more structure to it, but it's not nearly as thick and heavy as this hard pink fiber board. And the benefits of a Strobel stitch is you're standing on the foam a lot more, so you have a lot more squish. It's a lot just generally squishier than a hard fiber board. You do have a little bit more tendency to spill one way or the other, and it doesn't really compress as equally. These just feel a lot more like your normal sneakers, where these, on the other hand, feel almost more like boots. So which is better, the construction method out of the two? Well, if you like the stability and you like that support, you might like the New Balances, but if you like the really loose and more comfortable and squishy feel, you might like the Reeboks. But we're gonna have to wait to see what's on the inside, because I don't even really know exactly what's on inside the Reeboks. So let's cut them in half and really figure out which of these two shoes is the better shoe. His tongue just sewn in with a tiny little... What? All right, we got them cut in half, and if you're not subscribed, consider pushing the little subscribe button. Check out our handmade leather goods, our collaborations. That's how we're able to afford to buy brand new stuff, literally just to show you what's on the inside and which of these brands are lying and which ones are shading the truth and which ones are just outwardly lying. So now, let's see what's inside. So it is foam. I honestly, there was a second there, I was like, it might not be real foam. It might just be like a structured midsole, and this foam is all just for look. But it is truly foam all the way through. So this little side window here is that foam that you're standing on. And now you can really see how visually similar these are, but now you can really see how different that fiber board on the inside is. That is a big, thick, 3mm, pretty rigid fiber board compared to this very thin lasting material in the Strobel board. And that's the biggest difference between these two. It makes the shoes feel completely different, because even this cut in half shoe, you know, I can bend it like that, but it's fracturing and it's splitting that fiber board. It's pretty tough to do, versus this Strobel stitch one. You know, this is no big deal. I could do this by hand. So then, are these still built to the quality that built their name? That's not this particular New Balance 550. We've seen some other ones that are better, but I just think this leather is inexcusable, especially coming from New Balance, who are known for making high quality leathers. This was just a rare exception of New Balance not hitting their mark. But everything else, it seems like it performs like those old school sneakers probably did. You know, it seems like if out of the two of them, this is probably more true to the original, because it's still board lasted and it still has this really thick, rigid everything. The outsole is 2 to 3mm thicker than the Reeboks. And so I think this is fairly true to form. Just not this particular version. I think some of the other versions are closer. Reeboks, on the other hand, this seems to be built to the same standard through and through. You know, the leather still, you know, this is far from a performance leather, and you can see how loose some of these panels are and how bad their choices were, because this is more than just tumbled leather. Now that we've got it cut in half, we can see, like, this is some pretty loose grain where it's not the top coat that's separating, it's actual leather itself that has a really foamy structure to it because it's really cheap. So both of these leathers are a little bit iffy in terms of like living up to the standard that built the shoe. So which of these two shoes made the better true vintage low top athletic sneaker? I think on the whole, more people are gonna value the attributes of this shoe over the stability and support of the 550s. So I'm giving it a Reebok, but that doesn't mean I'm right. So let me know what you think. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe everyone disagrees. So put who you think won below in the comments. And thank you guys for watching this video and supporting us and being able to buy brand new stuff every single week just to cut in half to keep these brands accountable and show you what you're actually spending your hard-earned money on. And if you wanna support us, give us a little like, give us a sub, check out our handmade leather goods we make right here in the shop. shop that taught me everything that I know about leather, and our collaborations that are continuing to teach me more and more about the footwear world by working with some of these brands. So check all that out below, and thank you guys for your support. See ya.